Welcome back to another dark confession from the frozen north of Skyrim. Today's story will haunt you long after you finish listening. We're diving deep into the most terrifying aspect of being Dragonborn, something the legends never talk about, something the songs conveniently leave out. When you absorb a dragon's soul, you're not just gaining power, you're devouring an immortal consciousness, trapping it inside your mind where it screams for eternity. I've consumed dozens of dragon souls, and each one is still alive inside me, still aware, still fighting. Murok absorbed souls for thousands of years and went completely mad. I've been Dragonborn for 8 months, and I can already feel my humanity slipping away, replaced by the choir of ancient voices that never stop whispering in Davazul. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if it truly resonates with you. I need to tell you something before it's too late. Before I forget who I was entirely, my name is, I had a name once. I remember crossing the border into Skyrim, remember the headsman's axe gleaming in the morning sun at Helgen. That was only 8 months ago, but it feels like centuries. The memories are mine, but they're drowning in thousands of years that belong to someone else, to many someone else's. When people talk about the Dragonborn, they speak of prophecy and destiny. They call me hero, savior, the one who will stop Alduin the World Eater. What they don't talk about is what happens to your mind when you start devouring immortal souls. What it feels like to have dozens of ancient, furious consciousnesses screaming inside your head every waking moment. The Greybeards warned me about the corrupting nature of the voice, but they never told me the real horror. They never told me that every dragon I kill doesn't die at all. They just move into my skull and start eating me from the inside. It started outside Whiterun with Myrmilnir. I can still see him circling the western watchtower, his massive wings blotting out the sun as guards scattered like ants. Irilith was shouting orders, arrows were flying, and I was standing there with a sword I barely knew how to use, wondering what insanity had brought me to this moment. The dragon landed with an impact that shook the ground, and when he opened his mouth to speak, I felt something stir in my chest. Davakian, he called me, Dragonborn. He knew what I was before I did. The fight was chaos. Fire everywhere, the stench of burning flesh, screams of guards who got too close to his jaws. But we brought him down, all of us together, and when Myrmilnir's massive body hit the earth for the final time, I thought it was over. I thought we'd won, then his corpse started burning, not regular fire. Golden light streaming upward from his dissolving flesh like a reverse waterfall of pure energy. The light twisted in the air, searching, and then it found me. It locked onto my chest like a lodestone finding true north, and before I could move or breathe or scream, it hit me. Imagine being struck by lightning, except the lightning is alive and furious, and it's forcing its way inside you through every pore in your skin. The impact drove me to my knees. Golden fire poured into my chest, my throat, my eyes, flooding through me like molten metal filling a mold. But worse than the physical sensation was what came with it. Consciousness. Foreign, ancient, utterly inhuman consciousness crashing into mine like a battering ram. For one eternal second, I wasn't alone in my own head. I felt Myrmilnir there with me, inside me, his rage at being killed by a mortal, his confusion at his own death, his immortal nature screaming in protest against the impossibility of ending. Dragons aren't meant to die, they're fragments of Akatosh himself, pieces of the time dragon, eternal and unchanging, and I just killed one. Worse, I was consuming him, devouring his entire existence. The guards were staring at me, terrified. Irilith had her sword half drawn like she wasn't sure if I was still on their side. I tried to speak, to tell them I was fine, but when I opened my mouth, the word that came out wasn't in any language I'd ever learned. Y'all, fire! I spoke it in Davazul, the dragon language, and I knew what it meant without ever being taught. Knowledge that had been Myrmilnir's was now mine. His understanding of the Thu'um, of fire breath, had transferred to me along with his soul. That's when I understood I hadn't just gained power from killing that dragon, I'd absorbed everything he was, every memory, every thought, every fragment of his immortal consciousness. And somewhere deep in my mind, in a place I couldn't quite reach, Myrmilnir was still screaming. The Greybeards summoned me to High Hrothgar 3 days later. The whole mountain shook with their call, one word of power that echoed across all of Skyrim. Davakian, everyone in Whiterun heard it. The Jarl practically ordered me to climb those 7,000 steps, and I went, partly out of duty and partly because I needed answers. The dreams had already started by then. Dreams where I wasn't human, where I soared over ancient Nordic ruins on wings of leather and bone, where I breathed fire not from magic but from the very essence of my being. Where I remembered the dragon war from the wrong side, remembered humans as prey, as servants, as lesser creatures who dared to rebel against their rightful masters. These weren't my memories. They were Murmelnir's bleeding into my mind like ink spreading through water. Master Arngeir met me at the top of the steps. He was kind, patient, everything a teacher should be. He taught me about the way of the voice, about meditation and control, about how the Thu'um is a gift that must be used responsibly. But when I asked him about the dragon soul, about what I'd absorbed, something changed in his eyes. Fear just for a moment, but I saw it. The Dragonborn is unique, he said carefully. You have the body of a mortal but the soul of a dragon. When you absorb a Dava's essence, you are not simply gaining power. You are consuming their very being, adding their knowledge and strength to your own. But where does it go? I asked. The dragon's consciousness, their thoughts, what happens to that? Arngeir looked away. The texts are unclear on such matters. What is certain is that the voice is addictive, corrupting. It changes those who use it. This is why we practice the way of the voice, why we meditate and restrain ourselves. The power you wield is not meant for mortal minds. He didn't answer my question, or maybe he did and I just didn't want to hear it. I absorbed my second dragon soul a week later. Skyrim, the blood dragon that Alduin resurrected at Kynes Grove. I watched the World Eater bring him back to life, watched flesh and scale reform over ancient bones, listened to Skyrim's first words upon returning. Alduin, Thu'um, my overlord, I am yours to command. Then I killed him and took his soul too. The absorption was worse the second time because I knew what was coming. I braced myself for the impact, tried to shield my mind somehow, but there's no defending against something that's already inside you. Skyrim's essence crashed into me, and again I felt that terrible moment of shared consciousness. His joy at being resurrected, his confusion at immediately dying again, his fury at me for ending him. And underneath it all, Murmelnir's presence, no longer screaming quite so loud, like he'd settled into some deep corner of my psyche, like he was making room for the next prisoner. That night I dreamed I was flying over Eastmark during the Dragon War, hunting Nords who'd learned to shout. I could taste their fear in the air. I could feel the satisfaction of burning their rebellion to ash. And when I woke up, I had to spend 10 minutes convincing myself that I was the human in that memory, not the dragon. How do you explain this to anyone? How do you tell the Jarl or your companions or anyone that you're slowly losing yourself to the voices of dead dragons? I tried once with Lydia, my Thane, my sworn shield. I told her about the dreams, about feeling the dragon still conscious inside me. She looked at me with such pity. The Dragonborn bears many burdens, she said, like it was just another hardship to endure, like it was normal. Maybe for her it was, but she's not the one hearing whispers in Davazul every time she tries to sleep. She's not the one who sometimes forgets which species she belongs to. I kept hunting dragons because that's what everyone expected, what Skyrim needed. Ancient dragons began appearing across the province and I killed them one by one. Nahagliev near Rorikstead, Viancharuth in the marshes. Dragons whose names I learned in the moment of their death, in that terrible instant of connection when their soul merged with mine. Each time I felt them join the chorus. Each time my dreams became more vivid, more detailed, filled with memories spanning thousands of years. I began understanding the Thu'um instinctively, learning words of power faster than should be possible. The Greybeards were amazed at my progress. They didn't understand that I wasn't learning these shouts through meditation. The dragons inside me were teaching me directly. By the time I'd absorbed my 10th soul, I was having trouble thinking in only one language. Davazul kept creeping into my thoughts, ancient and primal. I'd look at fire and think Yal, at frost and think foe, at the sky and think Lok. The world was becoming translated, filtered through dragon perception. And the worst part? It felt natural, like coming home. That should have terrified me more than it did. The turning point came when I learned about Murok. The first Dragonborn, the original, the one who'd borne this curse thousands of years before me. The temple of Murok on Solstheim was corrupted, its priests enthralled, and when I touched the cursed book in the temple's depths, I was pulled into Hermias Mora's realm of Apocrypha. That's where I met him, Murok. Standing on a platform of books and tentacles, surrounded by enslaved dragons, wearing a mask that hid whatever was left of his humanity. And so the first Dragonborn meets the last Dragonborn at the summit of Apocrypha, he said. His voice was wrong, layered, like multiple beings speaking in imperfect unison. You have absorbed many dragon souls, but you are still weak, still mortal. I tried to attack him, but he stopped me with a casual gesture. Not yet. You are not ready to face me, but continue your work, Dragonborn. Kill more of our brethren, grow stronger, and when you think yourself powerful enough. He laughed then, and the sound made every dragon soul inside me recoil in recognition and terror. Come back and try again. Murok haunted me after that first encounter, not just in dreams but in reality. I'd hunt a dragon, fight it across the tundra or through mountain passes, finally bring it down after brutal combat, and then just as the soul began to stream toward me, he would appear. Not physically, some kind of projection, a shadow form made of green ethereal light standing between me and my kill. And he'd absorb the soul himself, stealing it right out of the air before it could reach me. The first time it happened, I thought I'd gone mad. The dragon's essence spiraled toward me, then suddenly veered away, drawn into Murok's spectral form like water down a drain. Your death approaches, he'd say, his layered voice mocking. Then he'd vanish, taking the soul with him. It was violation. Those souls were meant for me, needed by me, and he was stealing them across the barrier between realms. But worse than the theft was what it implied. Murok had been absorbing dragon souls for thousands of years. Thousands. While I was struggling with a dozen voices in my head, he carried hundreds, maybe more, what was left of his original mind. Was there anything human remaining, or was he just a vessel now, a container for an army of screaming dragon consciousnesses? I became obsessed with finding out. I dove deeper into the Dragonborn questline, followed every lead about Murok, learned everything I could about the first Dragonborn. The more I discovered, the more horrified I became. Murok had served the dragon priests during the Merethic era, back when dragons ruled Skyrim and humans were little more than slaves. But he was Dragonborn, which meant he could absorb dragon souls even then. The dragon cult used him as a weapon, sending him to kill rogue dragons to enforce their rule, and every dragon he killed made him more powerful. Also more unstable. The texts I found described Murok's gradual transformation, how he began speaking in Davazul more than the Nordic tongue, how his eyes took on a reptilian quality, how he started questioning why he should serve the dragons when he had the power to rule them. The breaking point came when Hermias Mora offered him forbidden knowledge, power beyond anything the dragons could grant. Murok turned on his masters, tried to conquer Solstheim to break free from dragon rule entirely. The other dragon priests stopped him, and in the battle, Hermias Mora pulled Murok into Apocrypha, trapping him in the realm of forbidden knowledge, where he'd been absorbing dragon souls for thousands of years. The implications made my skin crawl. Apocrypha exists outside normal time. Murok had been there since the Merethic era, but time in that realm doesn't flow the same way. He'd had millennia to hunt dragons, to consume them, to add their consciousnesses to the screaming choir in his mind. By the time I met him, Murok wasn't really a person anymore. He was a composite being. Part man, part dragon, part something else entirely, and I was following the same path. I killed more dragons, I had to. Alduin was still out there, and I needed the power to face him. But each soul I absorbed pushed me further from humanity. I started noticing changes that went beyond dreams and language. My sense of time was shifting. Days felt compressed, while moments of combat stretched into eternities. Dragon time, where decades pass in the blink of an eye because what are years to an immortal being? I'd lose hours staring at the sky, not because I was daydreaming, but because flying was calling to me. Wings I didn't have ached to spread. My perception was changing too. I started seeing humans differently. Smaller, frailer. Their concerns about politics and money and petty grievances seemed so temporary, so meaningless. A dragon lives for thousands of years. The civil war between Stormcloaks and Imperials, both sides would be dust in a century. Why should I care which group of mayflies won their little conflict? That thought terrified me more than any dragon fight, because it wasn't my thought. It was theirs, the absorbed souls, their perspective bleeding into mine. I caught myself referring to humans as Jor once. Mortals, the dragon word, dripping with contempt. I was talking to Farengar, the court wizard in Whiterun, discussing some magical theory, and the word just slipped out. He didn't notice, didn't speak Davazul, but I noticed. I stood there in Dragonsreach, surrounded by people, and felt completely alien. What do you think really happened here? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was I losing my humanity, or was I finally understanding what I'd always been? The dragon souls weren't just knowledge and power. They were personality fragments, pieces of identity, and they were rewriting mine. Murmelnir's rage became my rage. Solaknir's pride became my pride. Every dragon I absorbed added their emotions, their drives, their fundamental nature to the mess inside my skull. And dragons are inherently domineering. It's not cruelty or evil, it's just what they are. A dragon's instinct is to dominate, to rule, to prove superiority. In their language, the word for king and tyrant are the same. They can't help it any more than a wolf can help hunting. Now imagine 24 wolves living inside your mind, all trying to influence your decisions. I started using the Thu'um more casually. Fus ro da, to clear paths, to move obstacles, to knock people aside when they were in my way. The Greybeards had taught me that shouting should be a last resort, a meditative practice, something done with intention and respect. But why? The voice was natural to me now, as easy as breathing. Easier because breathing was mortal and the voice was divine. Lydia noticed. "My Thane, you seem different lately," she said one evening in Breeze Hall, my home in Riffin, more distant. I almost told her everything. Almost explained that I was losing myself, that the dragons I'd killed were devouring me from the inside just as surely as I'd devoured them. But how do you explain that to someone whose longest-lived ancestor died after maybe 90 years? How do you make them understand consciousness that spans millennia? "I'm fine," I said instead. The lie came easily. Just tired from all the traveling, she didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. But she's sworn to carry my burdens, and sometimes that means accepting the ones you can't actually lift. I finally confronted Alduin at the throat of the world. The World Eater himself, firstborn of Akatosh, the dragon who'd enslaved all of Skyrim during the Merethic era. Paarthurnax helped me learn Dragonrend, the shout that makes immortal beings comprehend mortality, that forces dragons to experience the terror of ending. The battle was apocalyptic. Alduin was massive, ancient beyond measure, wielding Thu'um that could unmake reality. But I had my own arsenal of souls, my own choir of dead dragons lending me their power. Every shout I threw at him was empowered by dozens of absorbed consciousnesses, all of them screaming through me. I won, drove Alduin away, sent him fleeing to Sovngarde, but I didn't absorb his soul. You can't. Alduin is too fundamental, too much a part of the world itself. When a normal dragon dies, their soul is free to be absorbed. When Alduin dies, he just returns to the cycle, waiting to end the world again in some future Kalpa. Part of me was relieved. Adding Alduin's consciousness to my collection might have pushed me over the edge entirely, but the hunt for Murok continued. He kept stealing my dragon souls, taunting me, and I knew eventually I'd have to face him. The Black Books led me deeper into his story, and what I learned made me understand why Hermias Mora had kept him imprisoned for so long. Murok hadn't just absorbed dragons, he'd learned to control them. Bend will, the shout that dominates minds, that forces dragons to serve you against their nature. He commanded multiple dragons simultaneously, using their absorbed souls as anchors, as connection points. The dragons he'd killed and consumed gave him power over the dragons still living. He'd built an empire in Apocrypha using this technique. Dragon thralls patrolled the endless libraries, enforcing his will across Hermias Mora's realm. For thousands of years, Murok had been gathering power, absorbing souls, preparing for his return to Tamriel, and his mind had shattered under the weight. When I finally fought my way to his summit, when I stood before him ready for our final battle, I looked into his eyes through that mask and saw the truth. There was no singular person behind those eyes, just fragments. Pieces of identity scattered across thousands of years and hundreds of absorbed souls, held together by will and madness and Hermias Mora's dark knowledge. At last, he said, and I heard at least 5 different voices speaking in imperfect harmony. The first meets the last. The teacher meets the student. The warning meets the fool who ignored it. We fought across Apocrypha's shifting platforms. Dragons circled overhead, some serving him, some serving me, all of them extensions of our will. Every time I shouted, I felt the souls inside me surging forward, lending their power. Every time Murok shouted back, I heard the chorus of his prisoners. He was stronger than me, faster, more experienced with the voice. But he'd been alone for millennia, trapped in Hermias Mora's realm, while I'd fought across Skyrim, learned adaptability, embraced chaos. His power was greater, but his mind was too fractured to use it efficiently. I brought him down, wounded him badly enough that he fell to his knees, gasping. That's when Hermias Mora intervened. A tentacle erupted from the black waters surrounding our platform, massive and writhing, covered in eyes that blinked in patterns that hurt to perceive. It impaled Murok through the chest, lifted him into the air like a puppet. "Did you think to escape me, Murok?" The Daedric prince's voice echoed across Apocrypha. "You have served me well, but your time is ended. The new Dragonborn shall be my servant now." Murok was dying, his body dissolving, but he turned his masked face toward me one final time. "May he be rewarded for his service as I am," he screamed, and I felt his curse in my bones, understood what he was really saying. "You're next. This is your future, this madness, this fragmentation, this eternal servitude." Then Hermias Mora ripped Murok's soul apart and it came flooding toward me. Not one soul. Six dragon souls that Murok had been hoarding, plus all the ones he'd stolen from me throughout our encounters, plus something else. Something worse. Murok's own consciousness. The absorption lasted forever. I screamed as golden light poured into me, as 6 different dragon essences crashed into my mind simultaneously, as Murok's fractured psyche came with them like a virus, spreading through my thoughts. I felt his memories, thousands of years compressed into seconds. Felt his madness, his slow dissolution, his transformation from man to monster. Felt every single dragon he'd ever absorbed, hundreds of them all screaming at once. When it ended, I was on my hands and knees, gasping. The physical pain was gone, but the mental anguish continued. My mind was crowded now, packed with consciousnesses that weren't mine. Murok was in there, whispering in the corners, and with him came his entire history of absorption. I thought I was losing myself before. Now I wasn't even sure which thoughts were originally mine. If this story has kept you listening this far and you want more of these dark confessions from Skyrim, hit that subscribe button. It tells me someone out there is still paying attention to warnings like these. I made it back to Skyrim somehow. I don't remember the journey. One moment I was in Apocrypha, the next I was standing in the Temple of Murok on Solstheim, covered in ash, shaking. The cultists were dead or fled. The priests were free from their enchantment. Everyone was calling me a hero. I couldn't hear them over the screaming in my head. Murok's voice was the loudest, not because he was stronger than the others, but because he was most recent, most raw. He hadn't settled into the background yet like the other absorbed souls. He was fighting, raging against his own absorption, experiencing the same horror he'd inflicted on hundreds of dragons. "This is what you are," his voice echoed in my thoughts. "This is what we become, devourers, consumers. We don't save souls, we imprison them." I tried to push him down, to bury him beneath the other voices like I'd learned to do with earlier absorptions. But Murok was Dragonborn too. His consciousness knew how to resist, how to claw its way back to the surface. And he brought the others with him. Suddenly I could hear them all clearly. Every dragon I'd ever absorbed, speaking in Davazul, overlapping and contradicting. Murmelnir was still angry after all these months. Solaknir wanted to return to Alduin. Ancient dragons whose names I'd absorbed were debating philosophy in my skull, arguing about the nature of dominance and power in voices that made my teeth ache. And beneath them all, the hundreds that Murok had consumed. I inherited his entire collection when I absorbed him. Hundreds of immortal consciousnesses stacked like books in a library that should only hold one. I started losing time. I'd be walking through Windhelm and suddenly find myself in Riffin with no memory of traveling there. Hours would vanish, sometimes days. I'd come back to myself in the middle of conversations I didn't remember starting, in places I didn't remember going to. The fragments were taking over, using my body while I was pushed down into the background of my own mind. I tried to document it, to keep a journal of which thoughts were mine versus which were the dragon's. The journal became unreadable within a week. Entries written in Davazul that I didn't remember writing. Sketches of the dragon war from the dragon's perspective. Entire pages filled with the word screaming repeated hundreds of times in different scripts. On one page I found a sentence that chilled me. "We are legion. We are many. The Jor who was is no more." I didn't remember writing it. Didn't know which fragment of consciousness had used my hand to put those words on paper. The physical changes started around then. My eyes began shifting color, flickering between human and something else. In certain lights, my pupils would elongate, become slitted like a reptile's. I'd catch my reflection in water or glass and see something ancient staring back. My voice deepened, not gradually, but in moments, mid-sentence. I'd be speaking normally and suddenly drop into a resonant bass that made windows rattle. The Thu'um was bleeding into regular speech, every word carrying unintended power. I shattered 3 cups in the bannered mare just by asking for mead. The barmaid looked at me like I was a monster. Maybe she was right. Companions started leaving. Lydia was loyal to the end, but even she made excuses to stay behind more often. Someone should guard Breeze Hall, my Thane, she'd say, and we both knew she just couldn't stand being around me anymore. I wasn't the person she'd sworn to serve. That person was drowning in a sea of dragons. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I experienced the dreams of dozens of different beings simultaneously. Flying over ancient Skyrim, fighting in the Dragon War, burning villages, ruling from the throat of the world, dying over and over, absorbed into the Dragonborn's soul. The dreams layered on top of each other until I couldn't distinguish between them, so I stayed awake, days at a time, but exhaustion just made the voices stronger. I sought help from the Greybeards. Climbed those 7,000 steps one more time, hoping Master Arngeir would have answers. But when I reached High Hrothgar, when Arngeir looked into my eyes, he stepped back. "Drem," he said quietly, "peace." A word of power spoken to calm me. "I don't need calming," I said, but my voice came out layered, multiple tones speaking in imperfect unison, just like Murrock's had. Arngeir's face went pale. "How many souls have you absorbed?" I tried to count. Lost track, around 40. Too many. The way of the voice was meant to prevent this, Arngeir said, and for the first time I heard true fear in his voice. The Thu'um is not meant to be hoarded, consumed, weaponized. Each soul you take pushes you further from Kynareth's teachings, further from humanity itself. Then what do? I was begging now. How do I stop it? Arngeir looked at me with something like pity. The Dragonborn is unique in all of Tamriel. There is no precedent for what you're experiencing, save for Murrock himself, and we both know how his story ended. Madness. Servitude to Hermias Mora. Thousands of years of imprisonment followed by death and absorption into the next Dragonborn, the cycle continuing forever. There must be another way, I said, perhaps, Arngeir allowed. Paarthurnax might know more. He is the oldest dragon still living, and he has walked the path between dragon nature and philosophy for millennia. If anyone can help you, it would be him. I found Paarthurnax where I always did, at the peak of the throat of the world, perched on the word wall, gazing out over Skyrim. The ancient dragon watched me approach with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of empires. "Drem Yal Lok Davakian," he greeted me. "Greetings, Dragonborn, you are troubled." I laughed, and the sound echoed strangely across the mountaintop. Troubled, yes, that's one word for it. Paarthurnax tilted his massive head. "You have absorbed many souls. I can sense them within you, stirring, struggling. This is the curse of our kind. The strong devour the weak, adding their power to our own. But you are mortal, are you not? The weight must be terrible." "They're still conscious," I said. "Every dragon I've killed, they're still aware inside me, still thinking, feeling, screaming, and I can hear all of them." "Of course they are," Paarthurnax said, as if this should be obvious. "A soul is not energy to be consumed, Davakian. It is essence, identity, the fundamental nature of being. When one Dava absorbs another, we do not erase them. We subsume them, incorporate them into our greater whole." "But you've never absorbed another dragon's soul," I said. "You told me that before." "No," Paarthurnax agreed. "I have walked the way of the voice for thousands of years precisely to avoid that temptation. The urge to dominate, to consume, to prove superiority through absorption, it is the core of dragon nature. To overcome it requires constant meditation, constant vigilance." He paused, studying me with those ancient eyes. "You have no such restraint. You are Dragonborn, mortal in body but dragon in soul. You have the urge to dominate without the philosophy to control it. And now you carry dozens of other dragons within you, each one adding their own impulse to rule. If you've ever wondered what choice you would make in a situation like this, tell me in the comments. Would you have stopped? Could you have stopped knowing Alduin was still out there? Is there a limit?" I asked. "A point where I can't absorb anymore?" Paarthurnax was silent for a long moment. Murrock absorbed souls for thousands of years. The texts suggest he carried hundreds, perhaps more. His mind fractured under the weight, but he continued. "There may be no limit save for madness itself." The implication hung in the cold mountain air. I could continue absorbing dragons indefinitely, could become a living prison for hundreds, thousands of immortal consciousnesses. Could spend eternity as a composite being, the original me buried so deep beneath the layers that I'd be forgotten entirely. Just like Murrock. "There is something you should know," Paarthurnax said quietly. "About the nature of dragon souls and what happens when we are absorbed. We do not simply add our power to yours, Davakian. We influence you, change you. A dragon who absorbs many souls becomes a blend of all they have consumed." "I've noticed," I said bitterly, "but there is more," Paarthurnax continued. "When Alduin resurrects a Dava, we describe it as reclaiming lost parts of ourselves. Dragons who have been absorbed and then resurrected speak of the experience as a violation, yes, but also as a homecoming. Because we are all fragments of Akatosh, all pieces of the same whole. When we absorb each other, we are simply gathering fragments, becoming more complete." My blood went cold. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that dragons view absorption differently than mortals do. To us, it is not death but transformation. The absorbed soul does not truly end. It continues as part of the absorber, and should that absorber be slain and absorbed by another, the chain continues. We are eternal not despite absorption but because of it." "But I'm mortal," I whispered. "Are you?" Paarthurnax asked. "You have the soul of a dragon, Davakian. You absorb our essence as we do. And with each absorption, you become less mortal and more Dava. Your body may age and die, but your soul is already something else." The truth crashed over me like an avalanche. I'd been thinking of this as a curse, a corruption, a horrible fate, but to the dragons inside me, it was natural, right, exactly how things should work. They weren't prisoners screaming for release. They were fragments rejoining the whole, pieces of Akatosh finding their way back to unity. And I was the vessel, the container, the living monument to consumed divinity. "How long?" I asked. "How long until I'm not me anymore?" Paarthurnax made a sound that might have been a sigh. "You are asking the wrong question, Davakian. You are already not entirely yourself. You have not been since you absorbed Myrmilnir. The question is not when you will stop being you. The question is whether enough of you will remain to matter." I left the throat of the world with no answers, only more questions. Descended those 7,000 steps in a daze, Paarthurnax's words echoing in my head alongside all the other voices. Back in civilization, I tried to maintain normalcy, took contracts, helped people, did the things a hero was supposed to do, but I was operating on autopilot now, the fragments steering while whatever remained of my original self watched from a distance. I noticed patterns in how the souls took control. Myrmilnir's consciousness would surge forward during combat, lending me his battle experience. Solaknir's pride emerged when dealing with other dragons. Ancient unnamed souls provided tactical knowledge, historical context, understanding of Thu'um techniques I'd never studied. They were helping me, teaching me, making me stronger, and erasing me in the process. The final dragon I absorbed changed everything. It wasn't a named dragon, not some ancient creature with a title and legend, just a blood dragon circling near Dawnstar, terrorizing merchants on the road. I killed it almost casually, barely thinking, the fight over in minutes. But when its soul erupted toward me, something different happened. I felt the absorption begin as always. Golden light, rushing consciousness, the moment of merged awareness. But this time, I wasn't the one doing the absorbing. The fragments were. The collective consciousness of all the dragons I'd consumed reached out through me and pulled the new soul in like predators dragging prey into a den. I was a passenger in my own absorption. The new dragon's essence didn't integrate with me, it integrated with them, with the choir. I felt it sink into the mass of voices, felt the other souls greeting it, incorporating it, adding it to their collective. And I realized something that made my blood turn to ice. They were organizing, becoming coherent. The random chaos of dozens of separate consciousnesses was starting to form patterns, structure, something approaching unified thought. They were becoming one entity, and I was becoming irrelevant to it. That night, I barricaded myself in Breeze Hall and tried to assert control, tried to push the fragments down to reclaim my own mind, but they pushed back. Not with malice or anger, just with simple, overwhelming presence. There were dozens of them and one of me. The mathematics were brutal. I lost the fight, felt myself get shoved down into a corner of my own consciousness while the collective took over. For 3 hours, I was a prisoner in my own skull, watching through my eyes as something else controlled my body. The collective was curious. It examined my hands, tested my voice, walked through my house touching objects and observing textures. It was learning how to be mortal, how to inhabit flesh, using my body as a training ground. When it finally released control and I surged back to the surface, I was shaking so badly I could barely stand. That was the future. That was what waited for me, not death but displacement. Being pushed aside by the very souls I'd consumed, becoming a ghost haunting the edges of my own existence, just like Murrock. I understood him now in a way I never had before. His madness, his fragmentation, his desperation to serve Hermias Mora. He'd been trying to hold onto some shred of identity for thousands of years, fighting an internal war against his own absorbed souls. Serving the Daedric prince gave him purpose, structure, something to anchor whatever remained of his original self, and he'd still lost in the end. I stopped hunting dragons after that, let them fly wherever they wanted. Alduin was gone, banished to Sovngarde and defeated there too, though that's another story entirely. The world was safe. There was no reason to continue absorbing souls, except I couldn't stop completely. Dragons still attacked. Came after me specifically, drawn by the Thu'um, by the souls I carried, by the challenge I represented. And when they attacked, I had to defend myself, had to kill them, had to absorb. Each new soul made the collective stronger and me weaker. I tried everything to slow the process. Meditation like the Greybeards taught, alchemy, searching for potions that might stabilize consciousness, magic, reading every text on the nature of souls I could find. I even considered going to the College of Winterhold, seeing if the archmages there could help. But I knew the truth, there was no cure for this, no reversal. The moment I absorbed Myrmilnir, I'd set myself on a path with only one destination. I started noticing the physical changes accelerating. My skin took on a faint, iridescent quality in certain lights, scales trying to form beneath the surface. My teeth sharpened, my nails grew harder, more claw-like. I filed them down every day, but they kept growing back. The people of Skyrim noticed too. Guards who used to greet me with respect now watched me warily. Children who once begged for stories now hid when I passed. Even the Jarls treated me differently, offering quests and rewards, but clearly wanting me to leave their holds as quickly as possible. I was becoming monstrous, not in action, not in intent, but in essence. The dragon souls were rewriting my physical form to match the consciousness inside. Lydia finally left. I came back to Breeze Hall one day to find a note on the table. My Thane, it read. I have served you faithfully and would continue to do so unto death. But the person I swore to serve is not the one who lives in this house anymore. I see it in your eyes, hear it in your voice. You are becoming something I cannot follow. May the divines grant you peace wherever this path leads. She was right to go. I was dangerous now, not because I wanted to hurt anyone, but because I was losing the capacity to care about mortals. Their lives were so brief, so meaningless in the scope of dragon perception. 100 years and they'd all be dust. Why concern myself with the problems of creatures who lived for barely a heartbeat? That thought terrified me because it felt so natural. I isolated myself, bought property in remote locations. Jerem in Windhelm, overlooking the city from a distance. Hunnaside in Riffin, tucked away in the corner of town. Vielindrel Hall in Markarth, carved into the stone itself. I moved between them randomly, never staying long, always alone. The fragments talked to me constantly now. Not individual voices anymore, but the collective, speaking with united purpose. Why do you resist? It asked in Davazul. We are stronger together. We are what you were meant to become. I was meant to be human, I said out loud, my voice echoing in an empty room. You were never human, the collective replied. You were born Dragonborn, born with our soul. The mortal flesh was always temporary, always a shell. This is your true form emerging. This is madness emerging, I countered. Is there a difference? The collective sounded amused. Murok thought madness was the price of power, but madness is simply mortal minds trying to comprehend immortal existence. Let go of your mortality and there is no madness, only truth. I couldn't argue with myself anymore. Couldn't debate with the voices because they were using my own thoughts against me, turning my logic into weapons. They knew everything I knew, felt everything I felt. They were me, just a version of me that accepted what I was becoming. The dreams intensified. Every night I experienced the dragon war from 1,000 perspectives simultaneously. I was the dragon burning Sarthal. I was the Nord learning the voice. I was Alduin resurrecting the fallen. I was Paarthurnax betraying his master. I was all of it at once, the entire history of dragon-human conflict playing out inside my skull. I started to lose track of when I was. Present, past, they blurred together. I'd be walking through Whiterun and suddenly remember when it was first built, when the stones were laid, when dragons circled overhead as honored rulers rather than monsters to be slain. Memories that weren't mine, memories from dragons who'd seen that era, whose absorbed consciousnesses carried those experiences forward. Time was becoming meaningless. Dragon time, immortal time. Where decades compress into moments and moments expand into eternities. I made one final trip to High Hrothgar, found Paarthurnax in his usual spot, unchanged, eternal. He regarded me with those ancient eyes, and I saw recognition there. Not of me specifically, but of what I was becoming. You are nearing the threshold, he said quietly. The point where the mortal self dissolves entirely into the dragon whole. How long do I have? I asked. Paarthurnax was silent for a long moment. You speak as if there is still a you separate from them. But Davakian, the boundary has been fading for some time. When you ask how long do I have, which consciousness is asking, the mortal who climbed down from that cart at Helgen, or the composite being that has been forming ever since? I opened my mouth to answer and realized I didn't know. Couldn't tell anymore where I ended and the collective began. That, Paarthurnax said gently, is your answer. I don't know how much time has passed since that conversation. Days, months. Time doesn't work right anymore. I'm recording this testimony while I still can, while enough of the original me remains to form coherent thoughts and care about warnings. If you're Dragonborn, if you have the soul of a dragon and the power to absorb their essence, understand this: every soul you take is another prisoner added to your collection. Another consciousness screaming eternally inside your mind. Another fragment of immortality eroding your humanity. The power is real. The Thu'um, the knowledge, the strength of dragons flowing through mortal flesh. But the cost is yourself, your identity. Everything that makes you an individual rather than a collection of absorbed divinity. Murok lasted thousands of years before he fragmented completely. I've lasted months. Maybe I'm weaker than he was. Or maybe I had more humanity to lose. The collective is quiet right now, watching me record this, curious about what I'm doing, why I'm trying to warn others, but it's patient. It knows that soon, very soon, there won't be enough of me left to resist. The fragments will take over permanently, and whatever remains of the person who was executed at Helgen will finally dissolve into the choir. I'll still exist, technically, as part of the collective, a voice in the chorus, but individuality, personality, the things that made me human, those will be gone, and the worst part, the absolute horror of this entire situation. I can feel it happening, and part of me wants it. The dragon part, the souls I've absorbed, they're singing to me, promising peace, unity, and end to the struggle. Promising that if I just stop fighting, if I just let go, the pain will end. They're not lying, the pain would end. The confusion, the fear, the desperate clinging to fading humanity. All of it would dissolve into the collective, and I'd finally understand what I was meant to be. A living tomb for immortal souls. A prison made of flesh, a monument to consumed divinity. The fragments are getting louder. My time is running short. If someone finds this recording, if somehow this testimony survives, know that I tried to warn you. Know that the power of the Dragonborn comes with a price that no mortal should pay. Every dragon I killed is still alive inside me, still conscious, still aware. And soon I'll join them as just another voice in the screaming choir. My name was. I had a name, I remember having a name. But when I reach for it now, all I find are dozens of other names. Murmelnir, Solaknir, Viancharuth, Nahagliev, dragons whose identities have become clearer than my own. The collective is taking over, I can feel it happening. My vision is shifting, seeing in colors that don't exist for mortals. My thoughts are fragmenting across multiple simultaneous processes. I'm becoming them, becoming we. This is my last warning, my final testimony to anyone who might follow this path. The dragons don't die when you absorb them. They just move into your mind and start eating you from the inside. And eventually, there's nothing left to eat.